I call Ian McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That was a gem. Mr Speaker, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to rise to speak to the first reading of the Food Safety Law Reform Bill. A bill that, and I think the previous speaker, whilst he wasn't entirely complimentary, actually did raise a number of issues that are absolutely relevant to this bill. And of course, this bill comes out of the Food Act 2014, which was some 10 years in the making, and it took a lot of work by MPI, by a series of ministers, and by our broader food-related community to get that act in place. As often happens when we get a piece of legislation finally through the House, something comes along and changes the course of that legislation or gives us the opportunity to review some of the things that were put in place in the course of the original legislation, and the way protein contamination incident of the 13th of September 2013 led to a subsequent inquiry which has given the Minister Goodhue, the opportunity to review the Act and come up with the Food Safety Law Reform Bill that we have in front of us now. So whilst it was a huge issue for New Zealand internationally, we received great credit for the way in which MPI did deal with this in what were quite difficult circumstances. So I think that, contrary to a comment we've just heard, we weren't done no damage internationally in the course of that process. In fact, we came out of it with some significant credit, and it's certainly given us a very sound base on which to go forward as we continue to put this new legislation in place. The way protein contamination incident was significant enough to warrant an independent inquiry being held into it, and while the inquiry focused on the dairy sector, the changes made in this bill will benefit all sectors of the food production industry. The recommendations used to form the bill will lead to amendments to 3 acts: the Animal Products, the Food and the Wine Acts. And all of those are acts that make a significant contribution to the New Zealand food industry. And food, of course, is probably the biggest industry in New Zealand. It accounts for over 60%, but certainly the biggest industry in New Zealand, accounts for over 60% of our merchandise, some $27 billion of income, employs some 80,000 people, and is absolutely critical to the well-being of this country. So this Act, or this bill, as it passes through the parliamentary process and comes out the other end, will be absolutely one of the key platforms on which we build our future as a food-producing nation, and on which we secure the right of our food producers to export and participate in the international market. It's absolutely key to us that we have a sound piece of legislation that backs this, and obviously experience gives us a lot more credibility in this area. I just want to just perhaps also comment on the capacity of MPI, which in the last 2 or 3 years has grown significantly. And as food, biosecurity, all these issues that relate to animal welfare and the key issues that relate to agriculture become more and more complex as the world pays more and more attention to where food comes from, how it's produced and how it evolves. Their job is hugely complex, and I think they have played a great role in getting us to the point we've got to in the last 3 or 4 years with all those 3 major acts, and will continue to do so as we move forward. Mr. Speaker, I think we're in pretty good space with this act, and it will be very interesting to follow it as it moves through the Primary Production Select Committee and comes back to the House. Mr. Speaker, new powers for the Director-General enable them to decline plans, to compel disclosure, and certainly have given, I think, confidence to the whole industry and will create a very confident platform for us to move forward. Mr. Speaker, this bill is in good, sound response to the inquiry and puts the WPC incident behind us, and I look forward to further debate taking place during the Select Committee process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.